Back in studio. It's been a while. I've been busy. We all get busy, especially around this time of year. It's crazy. I don't know about you, but I'm personally really looking forward to that Christmas break. Although, I'm looking at projects lining up during Christmas break, but that's okay. More importantly, I have somebody online that I've been really looking forward to talking to. Miss Michelle Glover-Decosta. Now, we talked about that before we kicked off here. So you've married and you have the hyphenated name. The plan is to switch it, like ID and everything like that. That's a pain in the butt, isn't it?
Well, it does, and you kind of build your brand on one name,
Yeah.
and people know you for so long as one, and then, you get married and you
Yeah.
want to change your name, and then they're
Yeah.
like, "Who is that?"
Yeah. DaCosta? What?
Yeah,
That's
never heard of
clever.
her.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
of course, us males, we don't have to do anything. We just have it easy, the male privilege. Thank you so much for joining me. We missed it last week, but we rescheduled here, so it's great to see you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. Little bit. Let's hear a little bit about you. Where are you located? And then where did you start? Like, who coaxed you into the dental world? And I know you did some. You're a CDA before all this magic, all this CAD/CAM magic.
Yeah, absolutely. So my career in dental, dates back over 15, 16 years now, which is kind of hard to believe. But started as a dental assistant, George Brown College in Toronto, and kind of been in Ontario since. So started, in private practice as a CDA, and I was very fortunate to work with technology as a CEREC dental assistant. And so I got, really extensive training with CDocs down in Scottsdale, Arizona, in the Spear Center. And it really kind of just like fueled me to like absolutely love technology and what it can do. And it really did give me a new sense of purpose as a dental assistant, as opposed to just being, chairside and suctioning and handing instruments and things like that. So it was just such a fun experience for me to really immerse myself in that technology. And it really became, such a passion of mine to want to educate others. And so that's where I found myself kind of, edging out of the clinical space, and I joined Patterson Dental for a period of time, where I was a CEREC representative. So I was helping to gain interest basically with CEREC in Ontario at the time, and then an opportunity at Dentsply Sirona came up 5 years, and it was funny enough actually in the lab space. And what's really unique about the lab space in Canada is it's not just dental laboratories, but also, thousands of denturists across the country.
Right.
And that in itself was like this new world for me of like, I knew the digital side of chairside, but now learning about it from both the lab and the denture side of things,
Yeah.
it was like, oh my God, it was just like a whole new universe from there. And,
I don't think that's, I don't think people like, I've kind of gone the same road too. Like I've done the clinical side. I spent some time with Henry Schein, and then I found myself in the laboratory world. And I think marrying the two together gives you such like a deeper grasp on the entire industry. Like it's awesome. Like and the people too. And like you spoke about denturists. They're like a different culture of people too, right? It's really cool to see. And everything just kind of all working together and everyone working together for one seamless
Honestly, I totally agree. Like it's such a beautiful industry that we have, and all these moving parts really, create such an amazing community within like the dental space. And I really do kind of appreciate, the chair side, even more knowing now what the labs do for them, right? And even the denturists as well too.
Sure.
So I've always enjoyed my time in the lab space. But I've also now switched into CAD/CAM sales at Dentsply Sirona. So I've been in Northeast Ontario now as the CAD/CAM representative, and it's kind of like coming home, right? Being able to talk CEREC and 3D printing and intraoral scanning and all that fun stuff. And it's really like it's second nature to me, right? Like I became a speaker and educator at DS kind of accidentally, but it's just
how does one like come upon that accidentally? Let's hear that story.
Well, Yeah, okay, so
We
it
need
was
somebody to
actually,
talk.
yeah, so it was actually like pretty remarkable. It was about almost 5 years ago now, actually, Pacific Dental Conference,
Okay.
5 years ago. And one of our KOLs, or key opinion leaders, he was supposed to be giving two lectures on the lab day on the Saturday. And he messages the night before and he was like, Michelle, I'm so sorry. I'm so sick. I'm in the hospital. I'm okay, but
Oh.
I can't make it in, like break a leg, kid. And I was like, what? And I
Yeah.
kind of looked at my coworker at the time and I'm like, what does he mean by break a leg? And she's like, I think you just got tapped in. And I was like, oh my God. Like,
Yeah.
didn't have any presentations, like, knew kind of what his content was going to be, but
Sure.
there was no presentations provided to me. So I was kind of like, well, I got to go to the hotel at 11:30 at night before. I'm building two 90-minute presentations on separate topics.
How
And
nervous were you?
like, I don't think there's even words to describe it.
Yeah, no
Like, it was
kidding.
just this, like, terror, and, like, I don't think I slept more than, like, an hour maybe, just like a
Yeah.
cat nap, basically.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, then it was like I had, like, so much fun doing it. Again, it was
Hmm.
terrifying, but, like, I just enjoyed it so much. And then, like, flash forward, like, 6 months after that, my CE manager's being like, "Hey, PDC wants you back next year." And I was
Oh,
like,
there you go.
based on this year's performance, really? Like,
Yeah.
okay, like, so yeah, and it's been amazing since. Like, I've been able to really have such a cool platform within Canada, and people have just welcomed me so much
Hmm.
as a speaker, which has been really cool, right? Because it's like I'm passionate about sharing, information, but it's like you never
Hmm.
know how people are going to be receptive to it, and it's
Right.
been really cool to see, what people think about, what your thoughts are on digital dentistry and stuff like that.
100%. Yeah. And
Yeah.
like, coming from your base of knowledge, I'm sure you killed it those
Yeah.
2 days at the
I
PDC.
appreciate that. I
Yeah. Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah, it was terrifying, but
And really, like, you're fortunate. I was just in Dr. Faraj Edher's practice with Seth, our mutual buddy. Um, you know, Dentsply Sirona's offering right now is pretty awesome, and folks need somebody like yourself out there educating them on how this all just kind of works together. Like,
yeah.
it's crazy. I'll let you speak to this, but from the early days of the CERAC coming through to what a doctor can do in their practice now is pretty significant.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people don't realize, because there are so many solutions out there, and like so many great ones at that too, but
Hmm.
what they sometimes don't realize is technologies that kind of sync together and integrate with each
Hmm.
other, it makes your life so much easier to
Yeah.
adopt it and continue to grow with it, right? Like we,
Yeah.
we think about like Apple products, for example, right? Like
Right.
we love like our watches communicating to our phones and laptops, things like that. So it's like, why can't we adopt that into our practice, right?
Yeah.
How can't
Yeah.
we adopt that with how we communicate with labs, right?
Yeah.
Like it's really got amazing potential when things sync together to
Right.
just naturally grow and like continue to flourish with it, but also to reach like your goals, right? Because it's like when you think about dentistry, you're not just standing still, right? You're
Yeah.
constantly evolving with your clinic and practice and like hoping to reach certain goals within that clinic. And really digital is should be at the forefront of that, right? Like it should
Yeah.
be the goal to always be striving for like the next best thing. If we just kind of stayed like still in dentistry, I don't think there'd be much for any of us to do, right? Or really enjoy, because
Yeah.
it'd be kind of dull.
I
So,
guess, but dentistry too is such a hands-on, and this is where you'll get the argument from an RDT, right? Dentistry is such a
yes.
hands-on analog thing too. Like, blending those two pieces together are still important. Obviously there's those deep margins, like that scanner can't see it, so it won't pick it up. So
Correct.
there are
Yeah.
cases where the hands-on part of all of this is still in play, like, and maybe
Yes.
will never go away. You know,
Yeah,
um,
no, I totally agree with you actually on that, right? Like and this is where I always say like lab techs are magicians, right?
yeah,
Like I always laugh when somebody says, well, couldn't your scanner, pick up, that like, or just remove that tissue that's there? And it's like, well, no, it's covering the margin. It's not going to
yeah,
take it away. Like the lab tech needs to be able to see that margin. So, yeah, no, I totally agree with you. There's definitely that, that balance of, dentist like digital dentistry can really humble a dentist
Yes.
because it's going to have to force you to become a better clinician, even if you don't realize that you need to become a better
Yeah.
clinician, just because you need to be able to provide better data for, your laboratories, or if you're
Love it.
keeping something
Yeah.
in house as well too, right? Like
Yeah.
it's you have to have that data that's really clean. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And yeah, the scanner, or that in particular, it doesn't like there is technique, right? There is the right way to scan, and it's the data. You're right. Like I work pretty closely with a few laboratories out here in BC, and they will say, you know, in the digital world, and I'll coin this as James Newber from Ocean Ceramics. Whenever there's a problem, you follow the data, right? Where's
Yeah.
the data missing, or so it's cool. Lots of fun, lots of new things, constantly evolving, and how do we keep up? How do we keep up, Michelle? How do we keep up with it all?
And you know what, like that's the question that everybody asks, right? And realistically, it's relying on manufacturers like Dentsply Sirona to bring
Mm,
you this information, right? Because it's like, yeah, there's so much information out there. It's like, how do you funnel it to be like, okay, what's relevant to me in my practice for what I do, right?
mhm.
Because what works for a prosthodontist might not be what works for, an endodontist, right? But it's like, at the same time, there's still lots of technologies that coincide for both of them, but do different things, right? So I think continuing education is such a huge part of what we do as
Yeah.
manufacturers. And it's what we have to continue to educate people about what's out there, right?
Yeah.
And remind them, like, this is why digital dentistry is here and it's to stay. Like, it's only going to keep on growing and
Mhm.
improving and evolving. Like, it's not going to go away and we're
No,
going to
it's
just
not.
suddenly be like, oh, Algin, it's amazing. It's the best thing,
Yeah. Well,
right? Like,
maybe, some solar flare will hit and it will just knock out every single device on the planet.
God
pull
forbid that
pull out the
happen,
goop. Get the goop. Yeah.
So yeah, I think really CE is a huge thing that
Mhm.
manufacturers have to really focus on when we bring things to the market, so that we can really educate those that are going to be then the consumer. Because again, with the right technology, with the right solutions, it should make their life and their day to day easier. And it should be ways to, like, help them grow their practice, help
Mhm.
them improve communication to their
Communication.
laboratory.
Absolutely. And I was
Help.
going to
Yeah.
touch on that too. Sorry, I cut you off. I do
No, no,
that
no,
from
all
time to
good.
time. You were mentioning sort of, the growth of the practice. I think, in the case of Faraj Edher, with the technology now, it's giving the patient a better experience.
Correct. Really, digital technology should always improve the patient experience, right?
Yeah.
Like, as a dental assistant, when I got to, kind of confirm and calm a patient to know, like, no, we're not going to use the goopy stuff. We're going to take like a video capture of your teeth today.
Hmm.
Like, it was just such a huge, like, aha moment for the patient, because like suddenly they wanted to be more involved in their oral health, right?
Hmm.
Like, when before, when I would take like an alginate, were they like, that was really cool, I really want to know what you just did, right? Like,
Yeah.
never did that happen, right? It was
Yeah.
like, get me out of this chair. Whereas like when I was doing, a single visit CEREC crown, like, they were immersed in like what I was doing on the screen, and like pointing like, oh, like, what's this, like, black
Yeah.
thing on my
Yeah.
tooth, and it's an amalgam filling that they're kind of like, oh, like, that doesn't look too good, right? And it's just because now they can see it on the screen and like
It's huge.
blown
Yeah.
up 80 times the
Yeah. You're
magnification. Like,
taking them
it's
through the
huge.
journey, right? You're taking them through the
Yeah.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's
Um,
so important for digital to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, what did we witness before? I don't know. I'm going to age myself, but I remember going to the dentist as a kid and having that actual Fuji, whatever dimension size X-ray up on the light up screen.
Yep.
This
Yep. The
little
light box.
this little darker spot here. That's a cavity mark. And then he
Yeah.
turns to the assistant and goes, spouts off the MO7, and you're like, oh my God.
MODBL. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh
You're like, what is
no.
that?
Oh, I'm nervous. Like, yeah. Now it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. Like, even,
Hmm.
capturing this data over time, we can show progression of things and deterioration, right? So
Yeah.
it's great case acceptance tool. But yeah, no, I agree. I think you're the right person to have this conversation with. And I've been having this conversation a lot, bouncing around, Vancouver. Um, you know, in between the registered dental technicians and what's happening with CERAC and chairside, even doing night guards and everything, it's possible now. Like it's getting better and at par maybe. Sorry, RDTs. What does our world look like when we have a viable 3D printed crown? Like what that it's gonna withstand the pressures of the mouth. It's a viable, looks good, it's layered, it
Yeah.
doesn't look like a marshmallow or a temporary. It's maybe we won't go to the full like anterior 3D printed, but
Hmm.
a large portion of the laboratory business is posterior units.
Yeah.
What
That's kind of their bread and
happens
butter. Yeah.
what happens when we can 3D print a zirconia crown for $15? What happens?
Yeah, you know what? Like, so there's kind of layers to this, right? So
Yeah.
for one, I think that
Oh,
the
I see what you did
really
there. Layers. I see what you did
yeah,
there.
there's layers to this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Oh, I didn't even mean to. That was just,
You're a
just
dental nerd.
yeah, just a huge dental geek over
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, when it comes to, like obviously like laboratories that have embraced the fact that dentists are getting involved with, the technology to be able to produce in-house, I think those that, adopt kind of that consultative approach with their dentists,
yes,
and those that look at design services and things like that, for one, they become such an integral part of the team still, right?
yeah,
Like it's not like that disappears then because, oh well, now we're producing in house, we don't need our RDT anymore, because that dentist is going to trust them even more because, hey, they provided me that design that worked out beautifully, I was just able to produce in house, right? So it's like there's certain elements to design services that I think are going to come into play a lot more as
hmm,
we start to grow with this technology. But you know what? It's funny. In a lot of kind of my lectures, when I talk about additive technology of printing versus, subtractive technology of
yeah,
milling, I still think really that the like 3D printing side of things is incredible for removable appliances. So
sure,
your surgical guides, your night guards, your dentures, obviously models, because that's what, the original intended use was for when, 3D printing came to dental. Where I really do think that right now milling is still kind of the gold standard for fixed cases,
yeah,
right? And it's because we've got that beautiful aesthetic quality that you need out of the materials, but also the strength. And like so far, I just haven't seen the 3D printed crowns
hmm,
even coming close to that of milled,
yeah,
right? So it's like for me, I'm skeptical right now. But again, if you talked to me 4 years ago about 3D printed dentures, I was like, they're garbage. They're so
yeah,
brittle. They look like
yeah.
bubble gum. And now I'm on the other side of it where I'm like, no, actually, materials have gotten better. 3D printing is like the gold standard for dentures now.
It's a
So I can
materials thing,
switch.
right? It
Yeah,
is
it's
a
a
materials
materials thing.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So like once I see one that, rivals like milled zirconia, I'll be able to change my tune. But right now, just seeing like the flexural strength being so down and
Hmm.
seeing the aesthetics being kind of flat looking, I'm like, it takes me back to like white zirconia that techs used to have to like dip the shades to like 15 years ago. That I'm like, I don't know, it's like nowhere near the strength of that, but
Yeah.
the aesthetic quality is like so poor
And we're
that I'm like,
scanning with
it feels like
that spray stuff, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm just like I feel like it's almost like us moving backwards with aesthetics versus where we could be, right? With like what we
Hmm.
already have from a milling perspective. So that's where, I still see there's this balance between the two. But I'm sure in another 5 years I'm gonna be like, 3D printing's kind of edging its way to being the gold standard, right? But
So
I just haven't seen it yet.
you danced around that beautifully, by the way. So what happens, and this I think, come on, like do you think it's just a matter of time before it becomes a viable thing when the materials catch up, the
I think
technology
so.
is accurate, like the layering is beautiful, and it might be just some polishing and away you go, you got a 3D printed crown. What happens when that's a thing? What happens to the industry? I think it turns the
Again, like
industry upside down.
I think I mean, yeah, there's definitely going to be some shakeups at that point, right? Because it's like, obviously labs are going to be a little bit worried, but at the same
Mhm.
time, I know that the very best labs out there, they've become such, an
Yes.
important part of a practice culture and things like that, that
Yeah.
that office will still want to utilize them for other things, right? So
Yeah.
like for example, when I was a dental assistant, our lab, we still grew with them so much, even though we
Yeah.
were doing all of our, single unit posteriors with our CEREC, we still did like a ton of full mouth rehabilitations with our laboratory. So it gave us more time to do the really complex stuff with the labs. And then
Right.
like we handle just like the slam dunk cases, right? So it's like, you're absolutely right. Those single posteriors are sometimes like the bread and butter for a laboratory.
Yeah.
But I think labs are going to have to really take on a lot of those complex workflows
Hmm.
and really immerse themselves in digital as well,
Yes.
so that they can be a true partner for that clinic that's also getting involved with digital. It's got to be this like balance and harmony between the two of them,
Yeah.
so that it makes obviously the clinician's life easier. Of like, hey, I know I can call my lab guy if I have a question or need a tip or something.
Hmm.
Whereas the lab's then not thinking like, oh well, that's business gone from me. Like I think there's got to be that balance.
Yeah.
But I think definitely design services come into play. But
Hmm.
obviously like laboratories really showcasing what they do from a complex perspective as well too, right?
I
Because there's so
totally
many
agree. Yeah.
aspects of dentistry.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, goodness, some of these folks like are like I don't know what it is about the laboratory business, but they always seem to be like multi-generational. Um,
Very
it's
true.
just turns into a family thing, and they've come from somewhere in Europe. Like there's
Yeah.
I hear that story all the time. Yeah, the educational part, but what about who QCs the dentist then? Where's their checkpoint for it all? Like if they're just pulling the crown off the mill or 3D printer and placing that crown, I think the laboratory kind of acts as the checkpoint for the dentist. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. Like I think they're gonna really have to immerse themselves as kind of that key component of digital for them, and that does need to be that, like, if the doctor needs to ask them something, or again if the doctor doesn't want to do the design themselves because they know and trust the technician's
Yeah,
hands so much with that, that can still be a layer that they achieve. Because if you're printing a crown with $2 of resin, spending $40 on a design isn't going to seem so bad when you think
sure.
about the cost saving stills, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
it's going to be that balance. But you will have some offices where you do have kind of a champion within the digital category, where yeah, maybe you do have a dental assistant who's kind of taken on more of the design because they love it.
yeah. Does
Yep.
that now pop up in schools? Like, will they be teaching how to operate all these pieces of equipment? Like, will there be another role in the dental clinic? That's what they do.
So right now, I would say that I would probably argue that a lot of the dental assistant programs across the country are a little bit behind in
Yeah.
what they're teaching them.
Oh,
I'm trying
educational
to.
system behind. Oh no.
I know.
Go figure.
But it's like, yeah, go figure, right? But it's
Yeah.
like you obviously, like, you still have to learn the analog in school because like you'll still
Hmm.
face that within the
Sure.
industry. But what's been kind of cool is like at the Dentsply Sirona Academy that we have in Mississauga, Ontario, we've
Hmm.
actually been like welcoming local universities and colleges like for like training programs on
Oh,
like how
cool.
to use the dental scanner and things like that, because it's going to become kind of like a standard, right, for all dental offices to have an intraoral camera, right, or scanner.
Yeah, like
Mhm.
I think that's standard of care already. I don't know many clinics that don't have an iOS scanner. Like I don't know
So I
any.
will say, in the West Coast, you guys are way better at adopting technology. The
Really?
East
Is
Coast,
that all right, for
yeah,
real? Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I noticed that actually on the lab side with even like the
Hmm.
denturism. Like when I would visit like the DABC with the British Columbia Dental, or sorry, denturists, like I was
Hmm.
amazed at how many of them were already immersed in digital.
Yeah.
Whereas like when you kind of trickle more to the East, like they're learning from those peers that they are so well respected in the West.
Yeah.
So I find kind of the same as with dental practices as well. There's still quite a few that are hesitant and saying like, is it here? And it's kind of like, oh, it's here. Like
It's been
intraoral
here for the
scanning, it's been here for a while.
we've
um
we've been here for like 20 years, or
yeah,
yeah.
there's
Yeah.
multi generations of these scanners now. So
There is
yeah, so
people are
that's,
buying their
yeah.
third and fourth.
Well, exactly. And
Yeah.
so quickly, those that were so hesitant, the skeptics we call them, right? Like they
Hmm.
wanted to learn from their peers and kind of the naysayers, and I think they'll be the ones that once they get it, they're like, oh, why didn't I do this sooner? Right. Cause it's like
Yeah.
then everyone in their practice is fighting over who gets the scanner. Right. Cause it's like
Yeah.
it becomes such a big component of your day to day to avoid those messy alginates or PVSs and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So,
I
yeah.
my personal dentist. I actually, well, I was at Henry Schein. I sold him a X-ray, the phosphor plate system, the ScanX, and every time I go into the practice to today, he's like hugs me. He's like, I don't know how I operated without this technology, and it always seems to be the case, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
honestly, like it's the number one thing they say after they make that big investment, right? They're
Yeah.
fearful initially. It's,
Sure.
what's the unknown kind of thing. But then as soon as they do it and they see like, wow, this does really work, it's where it becomes just like an easy conversation to, yeah, add more scanners or add additional
Yeah.
technology, things like that. Yeah.
When a new practice is built, it's, what scanner are they going with? Like it's you know it's I yeah. Anyways, it's interesting. It really is. But back to like the whole laboratory front too, and this analog conversation, like understanding the nuances behind the screen are so important. Like the fact that they should always teach the hands-on goop portion of like part of the curriculum, because really it's hard to disconnect those two worlds, from reality and virtual reality. Up on a screen, everything's kind of perfect and moved around. There's you don't have to deal with liquids or anything like that, right?
Well, exactly.
It's more controlled. So anyways, it's really interesting, super interesting. What's top secret and exciting at Dentsply Sirona right now? Let's hear the goods. What?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you've probably seen, and you would have been in Dr. Farage's place, so you probably would have seen it there. But Prime Print's been, really heating up the market in Canada.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and so when it comes to, once you launch a printer, you don't really see like, oh, this is the next printer or something like that from us. It's going to be the materials that keep on getting
yes,
released and things like that. So
yeah.
really excited this month, Lucitone Digital Print. It's been on the
Oh,
market already for 3 years with carbon printers and Asiga printers.
yep.
It's now coming to Prime Print as of this month
Oh,
in
really?
Canada. So that's super exciting because, a lot of denturists got excited about Prime Print. So they bought it
Mm-hmm.
and they've been waiting patiently
Yeah,
and so patiently for this material to be validated. So super excited to have that. One thing I can really appreciate about Dentsply Sirona is that we don't want to, kind of cut through any of the red tape. We want to really make sure that everything's validated because we do have it certified with Health Canada for certain reasons and medical
for sure.
device
Yeah.
components and things. So we never want to just like push something out to the market when it's
Well,
not
that's what the US
validated
is
fully.
for, right? Like that's the US. They're like 5 years ahead. They test it all for us, and then Canada finally catches up
Exactly.
5 years later,
Well, see,
right?
what's actually kind of remarkable is that we're actually launching at the same time for probably like the first
No
time
way. Come
ever.
on. No way.
Yeah,
I don't believe it.
I'm not even kidding.
Wow.
Literally, like
Okay.
we're launching Lucitone Print at the same time as the US,
Wow.
which is actually pretty exciting for Prime Print. So
That
yeah,
is pretty
that's
cool.
yeah. So like a relineable and repairable denture, long term, able to print the teeth, the base, and have it like be stronger than traditional Lucitone. I mean, traditional Lucitone's been around for like 80 years,
Yeah,
and for us to now have something from a printed perspective that's like stronger and superior to even our analog, like that to me is so cool.
well, that's
So
a big deal, because like people were
yeah.
flying with that with the carbon, and who has 70 grand to lease a carbon. Now it's becoming more accessible, which is pretty cool.
Well, exactly. And I was really excited when they brought on Asiga last
Hmm.
year
Yeah,
because it's such a great printer and there's so many of them across the country. So I was
yeah,
excited that, more people could get onboarded with the material. Because you're right, like when we look at carbon's landscape in Canada, not as vast, right? Like you've got some of
yeah,
the commercial labs who have it for the sheer size of it because you
yeah.
can get a lot printed at one time, but sometimes you're not looking for the capacity that the carbon does, and the Asiga can really be kind of that stepping stone. So
The
yeah,
carbon kind of is more suited towards the laboratory, I think, footprint.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, super excited to have Prime Print bring the Lucitone print system in this month to Canada, which is super exciting. I can't wait to get my hands on it more in our academy in
Yeah.
Mississauga because it's such a cool material. I got a sneak peek of it in April with some of our key opinion leaders, and although I've already been working with it with other printers, it was cool to see it like in our own system. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because it's like you hope to of course use it in your own system to
Yeah.
have to wait, the timelines that we did, you're like, oh, I just want it now. So it was really cool to see that. And then we have some new splint resins coming out as well too. And you might be thinking like, okay, it's splint resin, why is that great? It's
No,
really
I
the
that's awesome.
yeah. So we have a soft flex material, so it's
Yeah.
kind of more that flexibility to it, and one called Splint Tough. So you can go quite thin with it, but
Sure.
still get the strength that you're looking for from a night guard. So
Gotcha.
two new materials coming very soon to Canada as well too. Again, just pending that Health Canada check mark. So
Yeah.
whoever's
Uh,
got that paperwork on their desk in Health Canada, I want you to just check that off for us so we can get that ASAP
Good luck.
in case this reaches them.
Get in line, Michelle. Get in line.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
I think that's going to be what we continue to see is new materials for Prime Print,
Yeah.
and even DS Core. It's our cloud-based solution, but we've seen
Yep.
some really cool features to it. The Sure Smile simulator came out in September, so that's right on the spot, being able to get kind of a simulator of what clear aligner therapy could look like for a patient. I was on the phone with a doctor downtown Toronto. It's actually my dentist,
Yeah.
and she's like, "Hey, so you were telling me about this Sure Smile simulator in our last meeting. I have a patient in the chair. We've just scanned her. Can you just kind of walk me through what I have to do?" And so I was like, yeah, no problem. Go and log into DS Core, click simulator, then create simulation, and it's going to go through. And right on the spot, she was able to show her patient while I was on the phone, like the
That's
before
cool.
and the after. So it was very cool to see kind of in real time the power of that type of
Mhm.
workflow and something again that's accessible through the cloud, so would be accessible from anywhere in the office, which is cool.
I mean, in terms of selling the dream to a patient, that that in particular is such a powerful tool,
hmm
right?
At the end of the day, a lot of patients they want to see to believe, right? And
Yeah.
that's just the nature of it, right? And so
Yeah.
that for them to literally be able to see the results right before their eyes, that's a really cool thing to be able to
Yeah.
offer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how close that augmented reality will be to their actual reality is, I'm sure there's some like, depending on all of this other stuff, this is what we could do. It's pretty cool. There's been all sorts of little apps and stuff that you can download to like you smile and all these white weird teeth pop up and stuff like that.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
chiclets.
The
Yeah.
chiclets, yeah. Ugh. Or which system was it where the teeth were green? What system was that?
Green? Like,
Green, yes. The teeth were green, like showing like
like when you would do like a wax up or something?
yeah, they were
I can't
green.
remember. Was that Exocad? I can't
Maybe,
remember.
maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
I remember seeing it. I remember I was talking to Paresh Shah about it or something.
Yeah.
Hard to sell green teeth. Um, well, Michelle, I think we can have this conversation. I think we could probably talk for hours about this stuff. We'll have to have you back on.
Yeah, I would love
Um,
that. Anytime. I
yeah,
appreciate your time today. This has been awesome.
yeah. You're 3 hours ahead, right? So I'm sure you're ready to just kind of wrap things up here and get your weekend going. So I will allow you to do that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I
Yeah,
appreciate your time today. Thank you so
awesome.
much for having me.
Yeah, we'll chat soon. Thanks again.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.